Hi, I'm Caroline Leavitt. I'm the co-founder of Mighty Blaze, which was started when the pandemic did as a way to connect readers and writers and independent bookstores. And now that the pandemic is sort of over, we're still doing that more than ever. And we have a really special guest tonight. First, as many of you know, I've been just literally let me see if I can get it in the screen because I never can. I've been gushing over this book since I first read it in galleys. Half-Life of a Stolen Sister by Rachel Cantor, which is a novel of the Brontes. It's more than a novel of the Brontes. This book is so wild. It is, look at some of these reviews. Laugh out loud hilarious and thought-provokingly philosophical. Boston Globe. Cantor's imagination is exhilarating and cosmopolitan. And Booklist, Booklist, Cantor pulls out all the stops to make this a unique and unforgettable reading experience that's as difficult to describe as it is to set down. Clever without straining, true to the basic facts of the Brontes, and emotionally compelling Booklist. Let's see what else we have. Oh, and of course, my blurb was a total rave of the book because it just totally undid it. So Rachel Cantor is the author of the highly respected and highly praised novels, Highly Unlikely Scenario, Good on Paper, and of course this book. Her short stories have appeared in the Paris Review, One Story, the Kenyon Review, and more. She's got raves from the New York Times, the Boston Globe, NPR Books, the San Francisco Chronicle, and more. I'm also honored, just totally honored and delighted to say that Rachel is also my friend, and to prove it, here are these Jane Eyre earrings, which she gave me, which I'm wearing for the occasion. So, before we get to Rachel herself, I know you don't want to hear me keep going on and on and on. Half-Life of a Stolen Sister is unlike any book I've ever read. It's a reimagination of the Bronte sisters, Emily, Anne, Charlotte, Brother Branwell, from their childhood to their writing of their novels, to their early deaths, and to their masterpieces, including Jane Eyre by Charlotte, Wuthering Heights by Emily, and Agnes Grey by Anne Bronte. It questions about like what in their lives and relationships made them who they are, and the way it's written is so dazzling, and we're going to talk about that in our next question, that it forces you to rethink everything you ever thought, not just about the Brontes, but about art and sisters even, and time and novel structure. So before I do the introduction, I'm giving it right now, I just want to say, if you have any questions, do not be shy. Pop them in the chat. You don't have to share your face. You don't even have to share your name if you don't want to. We recommend that you go and get Rachel's book, Half-Life of a Stolen Sister, and all of her books at your favorite indie, or you can go right to bigbookshop.org. And to help you, I've posted the handy link right in the chat. So welcome, Rachel. Your book, Half-Life of a Stolen Sister, is just so completely gorgeous. I'm so thrilled to have you here.
Thank you so much, Caroline. I am so happy to be here. You guys got to know that Caroline, if you already do know this, Caroline is the absolute best. She is maybe the hardest working author I know, and yet she still somehow has time to give so much to the literary community. It's mind-boggling. I'm thrilled to be here, and this was the very first event we booked.
That's right.
We even booked my launch. So I've been looking forward to this literally for months, to talk to Caroline about this book, and I'm so pleased to be here. Thank you.
Me too. And I also want to tell people that this interview is going to live forever on the Mighty Blaze's YouTube station. So you can go back and look, and you can even ask questions you might have been too shy to ask now, but don't be shy. Okay, so first thing, the first question I have for you, and some of these I know the answer to because I heavily researched you. Why the Brontes? What was pushing you to write this book? And how did it personally change the way you view the Bronte sisters? And how do you hope it will change other people's perceptions of them? A lot of questions packed into one.
So many ones. So I started thinking about writing about the Brontes, I think, Caroline, it was 20 years ago, because I was overseas. I was writing my very first book, I mean, literally 20 years ago. And this is the days before Kindle, and I had run out of books already, as one does when one's traveling. I went to a bookstore. It was a Danish bookstore, and I happened to find in a dusty corner a copy of Charlotte Bronte's Leavitt, which is one of her later books. And I'd never read it, but I
I've never
remember.
read that one either, but I'm going to
Oh
now.
my gosh!
That's
Oh
good,
my
right?
gosh!
Okay.
It's very intense. But I remembered that a friend of mine in college, which had been a long time ago, but it stayed in my mind. It had been her favorite book. She was an English major. She was so smart.
Wow.
And so I always had in my mind that I would read Leavitt. So I bought it. But before I read it, Caroline, I read the preface. And in the preface, it acquainted me for the first time with the crazy, tragic life of the Bronte family. So in that preface, I learned about, first of all, the incredible creative insanity, which was their childhood. The four children who survived childhood, which would be, as you mentioned, Anne, Emily, Branwell, the brother, and Charlotte, they created
Two
these
did not, right?
imaginative worlds together. What's that?
I said two of the sisters did not survive.
Yes, they did not make it. So the four that were remaining, they created these whole imagined worlds. They wrote volumes and volumes and volumes of stories. They were just this creative, nonstop culture that they created for themselves, and that was fascinating to me. But what really moved me and stunned me was um, reading about all the deaths. So not only did the Bronte mother die when Charlotte was 5, and Anne, Branwell, and Emily were younger than 5, but the two older sisters, as you mentioned, died when that is, the two older sisters were 10 or 11 years old. And then during this horrifying 9-month period, first Branwell, then Emily, then Anne, all died.
Terrible. And there was Charlotte alone.
Only Charlotte left with her father, her aged father, and she was, by then in her early 30s, she was not conventionally attractive. She was considered to be well beyond the age with which she might marry. And she was somebody, Caroline, who so badly wanted love. She so badly needed people, and she had basically no one left. And I was so struck by all that loss and all that, just that creative flowering followed by that terrible situation, and I wanted to understand who she was, and I wanted to understand the family that created her, and how did she survive that, and how did she manage to continue creating in the face of all that sadness and loss, and in the end, how did she manage to find love so unpredictably? At least,
Yes, she married, right?
She married toward the very end of her life, so which she didn't even hit 40, so she was still in her 30s when she married. But the
Wow.
story of them just moved me so much, and I didn't have. I was working on other books. I didn't have a chance to even begin writing until 2010. So another
Wow.
many years had passed, and I don't know if you want me to keep going and tell you about the
No,
birth of
it's
the book.
fascinating. Yes, keep going,
Okay,
keep
the
going.
birth of the book. Well, I was fortunate enough to be at 2 residencies back to back, meaning I was in for 3 months straight. I was taken care of from morning till night, people feeding me
Wow.
and creative company, and it was a marvelous, marvelous time. And I brought all my research books, intending to start this book, and I had in mind to write a realistic book that I had this in mind for 6 or 7 or 8 years, however many years it has been. I was going to write a realistic book, maybe 4 novellas, one from each point of view of the 4 remaining Bronte siblings, and each would take a different point in their life, and together, whatever. I didn't have a very specific
Right.
idea. And then I started reading these biographies and the letters and the novels, and I started to write. And what came out, instead of realistic historical fiction, was this, right? This very different, very, very different idea. And
Let's
it
talk
went from
about
there.
let's
Yeah.
talk about that different idea. This book is sort of mind-bendingly original.
Right.
We don't usually think of the Brontes as playful, yet this book is totally playful,
Right.
totally entertaining. It's also heartbreaking, but it's the play is amazing
Yeah.
because first of all, it's hilariously fun. It's the story is told through text. The Bronte dad goes on Match.com to find, to hope to find a wife. There's diaries, home movies, fact and fiction. They talk about McMansions, all these current things. There are chapters of games. The father even writes his Lonely Hearts Match.com profile in one of the chapters. That, first of all, that must, how much of a blast was that to write? And second of all, was there ever a point when you were doing this where you stopped and said, how is this coming together? What am I doing? I just was so delighted. It was just so much. It was laugh. Some places were just laugh out loud.
I'm so glad you like that. Well, to be clear, in case it's not clear, what I did was I brought the Bronte family to a time and place much like our own. So they are in a 21st century mid-sized North American city that's not named. It could be your city, my city, as long as it's got a subway and snow and rent-controlled buildings. That's where they are. And again, as Caroline said, it's told through a lot. Different sections have different forms, lots of different points of view. All the Brontes are represented, and there's some external points of view as well. So I didn't intend this, as I said, and I just started writing, and there it was. It's just, a miracle of, if I can say that about my own writing, just being open and having this tremendous, again, this time and space in which I could just really connect with something that was very deep inside and not something I ever tried to control or anticipated. It was not something I planned. I just was allowed myself at that time to create this thing, and no, I never did second guess myself, which is maybe a little bit crazy.
Amazing. It's like, I'm telling you, like, all you read, this is the most enjoyable book ever.
There's a lot of joy in the book. There's a lot of joy in the book.
Yeah.
And I think joy comes from so many different places. It comes from the imagination that and of course it's all interpretation, of course, but I'm imagining this family, especially these children together, just being creatures of imagination, and allowing my imagination to kind of infiltrate theirs was a joyful experience. And also the bonds of the siblings, the bonds that they have together. They fight, they get each other angry, they betray each other in certain ways, they disappoint each other, but they are family, they're sisters and brothers. Yep. They love each other, and there's a lot of joy in that as well. And so I found it exhilarating to be part of that family, if I can put it that way. I found it exhilarating to present their play, and I found it exhilarating, I guess, to play myself and exercise my own imagination, to bring modern day equivalents to these moments, which were moments in the historical record, most of them. I took moments from their lives, critical moments, and said, what is this? What's happening in this day that might convey what happened in their lives? Yeah, it was a joyful and also very sad experience.
Right. Well, those are the best kinds of books that, it's always, it'll make you laugh, it'll make you cry. This book did that, but it did it in a really smart way. I want to talk about the economics of creativity, because that really plays into the Brontes. Like in the beginning, they're all writing these little books together. And then it's Charlotte's idea that they write novels to survive, for economic survival.
Course, which is also her idea. And then the novels. But yes, sorry to interrupt you.
Right. Do you think that having to worry about economics impacts creativity today? Sorry. And do you think certainly we see what's going on with publishing today and mergers and all this stuff, and they want your sales to be huge, but so it was kind of resonant for me when I was reading about the Brontes, who, they were geniuses in their writing, but they had to sell their books. Do you think, was it obviously was more difficult for women writers back then than males, but do you think that they would have been writing different books if they had not had that economic difficulty? What sustained them? Each other?
Well, I think it's funny. I was thinking the other day, I was wondering, as I was thinking about Branwell, somebody asked me a question about Branwell. He said he's
the only boy.
he's a disappointment. He becomes an addict of various substances, and he was meant to be the one who would take care of them. The father, he was
Right.
his father in real life was a vicar, and his living was associated with their family home. Once he died, they would lose that home. It was associated with
Right.
that job. So there was, and they were clearly never going to marry. So what was going to happen to them once he was no longer alive? They would possibly be destitute. And there was a real financial pressure. But I find myself wondering the other day, what would have happened if Branwell had done his job and had been able to support
Right.
them? It's
Right.
possible these novels might never have been written. Now, Emily in particular, and I think that this comes through in the book, and this is my interpretation. I did this research so long ago. I got to be straight that sometimes I don't know where the research ends and my own interpretation or story.
Okay.
My recollection is that Emily had no interest in publication. She just wanted to do her private thing. She was writing poems. She was very happy. Everyone else was miserable all around her. She just wanted to do her thing. She kind of had to be not bullied, but kind of pressured into writing a novel that might make them some money. And both Charlotte and Anne had ambitions of the sort. Anne was probably, in my interpretation, too reticent to
She
that
kept
in the
herself.
world. It required Charlotte's drive to make it all happen. But I think Charlotte would have no matter what. But having the sisters gave her courage. It gave her support always, not just for writing the book and publishing them, but she was the one who approached publishers. She's the one who made this happen.
Yeah, she was a strong.
Without the financial requirement that they earn some money, they might never have. I mean, who knows? They may never have.
Can we talk about what I found the most startling in real life and also in the book is that Charlotte attempted to rewrite the story of her sister Emily's writing Wuthering Heights because people at the time found it was too passionate, it was too vile, Heathcliff was terrible, it was too sexual. But the writer rewriting the writer is sort of fascinating in itself because, didn't they say that Gordon Lish used to rewrite the writers he edited? So I would love to hear you talk about that and talk about what I didn't quite get was why was Charlotte doing this to protect her sister Emily, or was she doing it to protect their income, or a little of both?
Well, I don't know that. I mean, in history, I don't know if she rewrote Wuthering Heights. I would have to go back and look.
She rewrote the commentary about it. She was more like Emily didn't mean this. What she meant was this, and she just failed to tell you that.
This happened. Charlotte was, and I think this comes through in the book somewhat, that she was in a certain way a very conventional person. She really wanted acceptance. She wanted to fit in, but she was never going to fit in. It was this kind of weird, tragic situation. She didn't have the personality to fit in. She was highly sensitive. She was easily offended. People, she bristled, and it was very hard for her to be a happy person in social life. And Emily had no interest. But all three of their books were considered coarse. They were considered controversial. They were considered ugly in their different ways. Even Jane Eyre, which is hard to imagine, were considered.
Oh, I just lost your voice. Are you still there?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's great. Yeah, I know. It's.
So Charlotte did have an interest after Emily died to try and rehabilitate her image and make her more acceptable. And I don't know if that had any historical effect. She tried to make her seem very dramatic. I think I underplayed that in my book because I don't know.
Okay, you're fading. We have a technical glitch here. If you can just sort of try to move a little closer to the speaker and speak.
I'm going to take these off. Maybe I'll take these off.
Well, no, they're fine with them on. Like right now, you're really clear.
This is the speaker. This is the speaker.
Oh, that is the speaker. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe it's like when you're moving. Maybe. No, it's okay. It's okay now. We'll deal with it. I want to keep talking. I want to keep talking about this because there's a wonderful quote, and I forgot to write down who said it in the book, which was about the shame of visibility, which sort of plays through this because at one point Emily says that when Charlotte dared to read her poetry, she wanted to die. She just, and I think it's interesting, and it's also a modern conundrum because a lot of writers, we want to write, we want to have readers, but at the same time there's a feeling of, oh my God, we're so exposed. People are going to know who we are and they're going to make judgments, and there's nothing we can do because the thing is already written. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, in my conception, can you hear me okay?
Yep, I can hear you fine.
Okay. In my conception of these characters, Charlotte wanted nothing more than to be seen, to be visible,
Charlotte did.
right?
Charlotte did.
She wanted what was inside to be visible to a partner, to her family, to readers. And it was her constant struggle was to make herself seen. And she just wanted that so bad. And I think Emily was the exact opposite. She was, in my imagination anyway, she was very self-sufficient. She had zero, it wasn't about shame. It was zero interest in anyone kind of entering her imaginative world because she was so, it was just fine the way it was. She just was a person unto herself, and her writing was just for herself, and she would have been absolutely happy if no one ever read any of her poems ever.
Isn't that amazing?
That's how I understand them. Yeah.
I want to pause right now because I would love it if you would read a few pages so that everybody out there can see how ferociously funny this book is.
Okay. I'm going to read just a couple pages from the very beginning of the book. It's not the very, very beginning. It's one of the first stories. It's actually the story I started writing, the very first one I wrote. It told me so much about the characters, who they are. In this story, it's a title story. It's called Half-Life of a Stolen Sister. Charlotte is about 10, and Branwell is 9, and so Emily is 8, and whatever, Anne is about 6. And they were homeschooled and kind of self-taught. And in this story, they are learning about spies, which also means in their world of where their schooling and their learning and their play is all enmeshed. They're learning about spies, and they're acting like spies, and they're looking for spies, and it's all a big jumble. So this is called Half-Life of a Stolen Sister, in which 4 children learn and play. Bran is doing a jig. Through the seeing eyeglass, Lottie spots him on a hillock, his arms outspread, his hair tangled and flying about his head. He shouts into his headset, "Branwell Bronte is master of all he foresees." There is something essential Branwell does not understand about being a spy. It's funny, right? "You're talking about yourself in the third person again," Lottie says, Lottie being short for Charlotte. Lottie's spy place is a tangle of bushes near a cluster of picnics. There will be much intelligence there, and none on Bran's hilltop. The mission to rescue the stolen sisters, girls of all virtue with hair of fine spun gold, imprisoned for being too beautiful, was advancing. The sisters, Maria and Elizabeth, which of course are the names of the 2 older sisters who died. The sisters, Maria and Elizabeth, leapt from the tower of their imprisonment at the beginning of time, hands entwined, only to be captured by the lurking giants of the ancient sons of evil, who held them captive for eventual marriage to the ugly, everlasting king of Darkling Land. The spies are proud of their progress. The state of Brandy's breeches, grass-stained and soiled, is much less satisfactory.
It's hilarious. It's absolutely hilarious.
So
We actually we have a audience question.
Okay.
Here we go. It came up there. Who's your favorite Bronte and why? And which of their books do you love most?
You know, Jane Eyre is the first one I read, and it's still my favorite book ever. I read it when I was 10. I think a lot of people who are fans of the Brontes read their books early, and they really imprinted on us. And Jane Eyre in particular, I loved the main character of Jane. She's smart, she's spunky, she's ill-treated, life is so unfair, but she keeps her dignity. And I think like the character of this of Jane Eyre is dealt with in the book. I kind of talk about the genesis of the story and what I imagine Charlotte's feelings are about the character. So that was my first book, and I didn't read the other books until I was an adult. Um, um, Wuthering Heights is a brutal, crazy book. I wasn't prepared for it after watching. I'm sure I watched the movies, the Hollywood movies. It's not that. It's
It's
something
not the book. The book is so
altogether
different.
more shocking and
Yeah.
astounding book. And Villette is amazing. It's very different from Jane Eyre in certain ways. So, do I have a favorite Bronte? I think the Bronte who interests me most is Charlotte, and I think it's because of her resilience, because she had so many feelings and she wanted so badly to have people in her life who, as I've been saying, who see her and love her and understand her. And she had that and lost it, obviously, through no fault of her own. And the resilience that she showed, her ability to keep going and to keep writing and to keep hoping. And I just find that so amazing. And she was the inspiration of the book. So I don't like, it's like choosing between your children, I guess, at this point, to say that I love one more than the other, but I guess it has to be Charlotte, thanks.
It's interesting that
Yeah.
Agnes seems to be like almost the lonely stepsister, and that
You mean
everybody
Anne?
knows Charlotte, everybody knows Emily,
Yeah.
but we
Yeah.
don't often hear about Charlotte. What was the audience reaction to her book when it came out, to Agnes Grey?
Anne, with Anne's books?
Yeah, Anne's book, right?
Yeah. She wrote two books, and I honestly I can't remember which one came first, but they both dealt with social issues, and they both were ahead of their time, and therefore
Right.
I mean, together with the other books, Jane Eyre less than, but certainly Wuthering Heights, they were condemned as being coarse. And why would you write about a drunken man who's, if I remember correctly, was abusive to his wife? Why would you write about it? Why would you write about all these ugly situations? So she was, and in my book, I view her as kind of disappointed by that she had these ideas that through writing she might change things, she might have an effect in the world. And in the book, as I see things, that she may have been disappointed in the end that her books didn't have the effect that she was hoping for.
But why do you think that so many people, um, from there's so many movies been made of Bronte books, but
Mm.
even I believe it was the 20s or the 30s. Somebody wrote the wide. I forget the name of the author. The Wide Sargasso Sea,
Yeah,
which was
yeah.
about which was about Jane Eyre told from the point of view of Rochester's
Mm.
wife in the
The Mad
attic.
Woman in the Attic. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and it was incredible, and that got me thinking about, like what you just said about Wuthering Heights, where the movies are always this wonderful romantic thing, and you feel for Heathcliff, but when you read the book continues after Kathy's death, and
Yeah.
Heathcliff is like the nastiest
It's horrible.
sociopathic son of
Yeah,
a bitch you'd ever
yeah,
want to meet, but the book is still gripping and riveting. It's interesting that people keep trying to rewrite them
yeah.
when the power is right there. I mean,
Well, they're very evocative. I mean, there's so many sides to the Jane Eyre story. There's the childhood side. There's this
right,
incredible romance. What's going on? There's the mystery. She goes off because she's so horrified and offended. She can't possibly be with him, obviously, because she's a person of principle. And she goes off and she finds these long lost cousins or whatever they were, and she somehow inherits money the way one did, back then.
right,
And she
right.
becomes a person who can stand up for herself. I mean, she always could stand up for herself, but she had more grounding. And there's so much in the book that I understand why people have come at it from different angles. And certainly, in the 20th century, when we're looking at taking feminist view of things, there's a lot to say
Yeah.
about a mad woman in our attic, right? What does that mean? Yeah,
That's right. That's
yeah.
absolutely right. Um, what in the research surprise? Oh wait, we have an audience question. What
Yeah.
writing advice would you give to your younger self?
I didn't start writing until I was middle aged, let's say. I started
Really,
writing in my late 30s and went to grad school when I was nearly 40
I
and
didn't
started
know that.
publishing short stories in my 40s. So what I would give my younger self advice would be just do it. I always wanted to write, always. And
And you didn't? And you didn't, though? Even as a kid, you didn't scribble?
I did when I was a
Wow.
kid. No. I did when I was a kid, and then by the time I got to college, I just thought, you can't write. You're not James Joyce. What right do you have to write if you're not James Joyce? You're not the most brilliant person on the planet. Very sad, and it took a long time to get to a point. And now it's all no. Now, I mean, now I'm a writer. It's all I want to do. It's all I think about. It's hard to even relate to that younger self that felt so inhibited by, the canon, or felt so inhibited by precedent that I just couldn't see
Oh, yeah.
myself. Yeah, I couldn't see myself entering that world legitimately. And then so I would just tell my younger self, just do it. Do it.
Right.
You're not, do it even if it's just because you love doing it. You don't have to be James Joyce. Can you imagine being somebody who thinks you have to be James Joyce before you pick up a pen and even try? Yeah, I wouldn't even try.
Right. No, you know what, you have to like burrow deep in your heart and write the book you need to write. Okay,
Yeah,
we have another audience question. Don't be shy out there.
I love
What
answering.
surprised you? Oh, no, that's the same one. Sorry. Come on. What
What's surprising?
surprised you the most about this book? I think
The book
what
that I
that question
wrote.
means is the research. That you wrote it.
The thing that surprised me most about the book was the book. It was that I did such a right turn without intending it, that I suddenly, I mean, literally the piece that I read from was where I started. That page was where I started. I intended to write a realistic book, and before the first page was written, they were running around in a park and going to visit dioramas in the museum and hopping on the subway, and I in no way planned this. In no way. And so I surprised myself, and that may or may not, they may or may not be what you're really getting at with a question. But in terms of the characters and stuff, I think what surprised me in learning about the characters is just how witty and funny they were. I mean, once I learned about the contours of their life and all the deaths and their childhood play and stuff, that was the basic stuff. But then when I really dug in and I read what they'd written and read about them, learning about how witty and funny and playful they were,
Well, that comes across in this book. Sometimes it doesn't come across in their books, although
no,
there
no,
are
no.
certain scenes that are so vivid in the Bronte books. And, the girl in Jane Eyre who dies of consumption or whatever they call it back then, for example. Oh, you have another comment from Matthew Landsberg. Loving this conversation so much. The book sounds so great, Rachel. Can't wait to read it. It is great. It is great. And this is my chance to tell everybody to please buy it at your favorite indie bookstore. Just take a walk down the block. Hopefully it'll be there. And also you can go to bookshop.org and we have a link there. And we just have another question. Thank you so much. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Yan. Rachel, can you tell us about the amazing cover? Did you love it at first sight or did it evolve over time? Yeah, this cover is like
I'll show you
incredible.
again.
It's gorgeous.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And I'll be absolutely honest with you, because you are all Caroline's friends. I had two reactions from the book cover when I saw it first. One was, oh my gosh, this is so arresting and beautiful, and people are going to pick this up in a bookstore, and isn't it stunning? And the other one was, huh? What? I don't understand. So my visceral reaction was all positive, and it was related to the aesthetic. And then my brain started kicking in and was like, what do the threads mean? What does this mean? And no, I love the book. I love the
I love it. I think it
Yeah,
just
yeah.
stops, especially since this is sort of the same cover as I should have pulled it out. It's another favorite book of mine, The Bronte Myth, which is about the sisters. They
Yes,
always show
yeah.
this kind of
Yeah.
picture, and when I saw it, with like it's transformed. It's just sort of
It's a very famous painting that was painted by Branwell. You may not know that. Painted by Branwell.
I didn't know that. I didn't know he had any talent.
Well, he may not have had very much talent, but this little smudge here, this big smudge, that was his head. And he painted himself out of this image.
What? I didn't know that.
Yeah. So
why did he paint himself out?
There's so many things we don't know. Who the hell knows? But I think with time, whatever he did to paint himself out, the effacement was itself effaced somewhat. So you're starting to see like this ghostly image of him.
Wow.
And it's really fitting, because he was sort of he did kind of haunt his sisters with his
He didn't want it on his
behavior.
Tinder profile in modern day. That fits him in the book. Oh, it's just incredible. Now I love the cover even more. It's just absolutely incredible.
Yeah, there's a very famous image which should be known to people who are actually Bronte fans.
Wow, that is really great. That is completely mind-blowingly great. I always ask this question because I am an obsessive, kind of anxious person, as you know,
anything about
Rachel.
Anything about anxiety. Well, it's the book, obviously.
Beside the book. It's all the book.
It's all the book. It's the book I want to read readers, and it's so hard these days. It's just so hard. I mean, we all have to come all the writers. I want everybody to
move the speaker up.
Sorry.
Oh, just move your speaker up closer to your mouth a little bit more. I'm sorry.
No, I'm moving. Probably that has.
Yeah, that's okay. Now it's great.
I make too many gestures. I move my head too much. So
yeah, I do too. I'm always like that.
Have read the book, to share their love of the book, and to tell other people about it, because it's just the literary gatekeepers are concerned with a very small number of the same books. I want the word to get out. So all I'm consumed with is getting the word out about the book. Otherwise, my anxiety has to be
yes.
my physical person. You know?
Tweet about it, post reviews.
Yeah, the usual.
You know what? This is actually an important message for every book, especially now in this publishing climate. If you love a book, tell your friends. Don't just tell them once. Tell them a couple of times. Buy an extra copy of a book and give it to them. Post about it on social media.
Tag me.
Just spread the word and it's just review it. This is one of my favorite books of the year. And if you want to be my friend, buy the book. Buy the book. And I'll know if you did or if you didn't. No, I won't, but I'm just saying that. We have another question from Matthew. Can you talk about the challenges of placing these characters in a contemporary setting? Did you have to create any rules for what would be permissible or impermissible in this reimagination of these people's lives? That's an interesting question.
Mm-hmm. I think rules, if I had rules, they were all kind of intuited. I really, the process I went through was very much writing the next piece. I would read a section of the biography, read a section of the letters that corresponded with that. I would sit with it and say, what is the moment? Or I would stop when something struck me as being, this is the next moment I have to write about. It was an event. It was something striking that happened. It was a conflict. It was something, and then I would just try to imagine what the form was, or the voice, maybe one or the other, maybe the two came together, and something would come to mind. It was a very intuitive process. And so I'm not sure that I had rules. There were places I would not go, I guess. And that maybe wasn't so much about being in the current day as just, we had this conversation recently with somebody else who has written historical fiction. Mine's not historical fiction, but written about historical figures. And we decided that we felt comfortable ascribing motivation, talking about their inner processes, deciding speculating, I guess is the right word, about what was going on in their minds when they made a certain decision, but less okay about speculating about actions. And that's how I feel. So there's a lot of kind of biographical speculation, for example, about Anne. Was she in love with, did she have a crush on this certain vicar named William Waitman? Okay. So did she have something going with him? So I could have written something about that, but it felt not okay. It felt like I was taking sides with a historical, unresolved question, and I didn't want to do that. There's a piece in here about Charlotte. So she spent 3 days with her publisher at his country house, and something happened there. We don't know what it was. And after that point, nothing was the same. Maybe you remember that piece. Nothing was the same.
Right.
Their relationship, as it had grown to that point, was different. It was cold. It was professional. And
that's right. Do you have any idea what happened?
Well, so what I did was I wrote a piece, and the piece is from the point of view of I don't know, a biographer or a literary analyst who
Which
is
is genius and
speculating,
fun.
speculating and bringing forth lots of different options about what might have happened. So that was a point that I wasn't willing to make some essentially arbitrary decision about what happened
Right.
during those 3 days. To me, it was more interesting to
Not
investigate
to
the
know.
mystery of what happened. And I think this biographer or whoever it was comes up with a plausible, a plausible explanation. But again, it is speculation. So there's another story, for example, about that's from the point of view of Anne, and she's recollecting what happened when she was working at the Robinson family and she brought in Branwell. He needed a job, and so she got him a job there. And this is when he and the mother of that family started having an affair, and it was very destructive, at least
Wow.
from the view of the Bronte family. And so the story is not just interesting to me about that fact, which is a pretty well known, I mean, in certain circles, well known historical fact, but what was going on in Anne's mind? She had a very strong sense of moral scruples. She in my view, would have been mortified to have been associated with anything that had to do with the enabling of this
Right.
transgressive relationship. So the story is not just about what Branwell did; it's really about what she did. But to do that, I had to speculate. But it's speculating about what happens in here rather than what happens with actions. Now, I don't know if that's answering your question. I don't know if it was a rule. It's something that I'm kind of retroactively understanding about my process.
Well, it was
Yeah.
done brilliantly. So once again, here's this gorgeous, gorgeous cover that you're never going to look at the same now that you know that was
Yeah.
Branwell
Yeah.
grayed out.
Yeah.
Are we sure that he grayed himself out or did somebody
Oh no,
else?
I believe he did. No, I believe he did.
You
Again,
believe he did. Okay.
it's a long time since I did the research, and I did not refresh my memory, but this is my
Okay.
recollection. Yeah.
Okay. That's good to know.
I had an actual Bronte expert at my reading last night who, thank heavens, did not correct anything I said.
Wow. Wow. That must have been fun. Did she ask you any surprising questions?
No,
Did
no,
you-
she did. She was a
Okay.
good person.
All right. So anyway, so we need to stop now. So I want to thank everybody so much for being here. Please, independent bookstores, bookshop.org, buy Rachel's book, buy everybody's book, buy multiple copies. If you love the
My
book,
Caroline's
post.
book.
If
You'll
you love
read
the
it.
book,
You'll be very happy.
post about it, tell
Mm.
people about it, and I hope to see all of you next time and have a wonderful time. So I'm going to sign off, but Rachel, you stay.
I say,
Okay.
I'm not going anywhere. Thanks,
Bye,
everybody.
everybody.